Hey everyone, it's Dev, and you're listening to Pop Culture Ketchup, a Millennials podcast. Welcome back to Pop Culture Ketchup, a Millennials podcast. It is October 20th. On a Tuesday. We are turning up for sure. So it's been a good week. Last week it was pretty cool. Everything was great. How is everybody doing? You know, it's October, it's the middle of October. Elections are coming up, but we're not going to talk about that right now because it's almost Halloween, and we're going to focus on that. Hopefully, for those that listen to the podcast last week, they knew how I would be as a ghost hunter. This week I just wanted to read maybe one or two stories to get you in the mindset of Halloween and the scariness and all of the fun stuff that comes with that. I'm doing this for you because I hate scary things. So I'm doing this for you guys. So if you like what you hear, because you know that I put out podcasts, because this is the 8th week that I'm doing this. If you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and also give this video a like. If you don't know, the likes and you watching and listening to this episode really helps me out. It helps with the algorithm. It helps me get my channel out there so it can grow as well. So if you really do like what you saw or hear, please share it, subscribe to it, like it. My goal is 75 subscribers. I'm at 64 right now. Yeah, I also have a Facebook page, Pop Culture Ketchup. It's ketchup like the condiment, not actually catching up. You could also follow me on my socials on Twitter and Instagram. It's Dev, ITSDEVVV. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to get started with the scary stories. The first scary story is taken from Reddit. Okay, it is hard finding scary stories to read that aren't like literature scary stories. So I'm taking it from Reddit. This is from 3 years ago. It's called The Quiet Neighbor. If you read it, it's great. If you didn't, well, you're gonna hear it now. It's by Pipinacious, whatever that is. But it's called The Quiet Neighbor. I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to do my best. This is the first time I'm reading it. And so for those that don't like scary stories, I'm going to just do all the trigger warnings just in case. Oh my gosh, it has my name in it. Okay, sorry. I'm going to get started, but it's just going to be a chill episode. I'm just going to be reading maybe 2 or 3 scary stories for you guys. Enjoy. The Quiet Neighbor. Just about the first thing anyone new to the neighborhood learned was to avoid Bud Fillmore, cantankerous, territorial, and fueled by what seemed to be a deep-seated hatred for just about everything. He was the kind of man that childhood nightmares were made of. Although he'd only lived there for a few months longer than us, by the time my family moved in across the street from the Fillmore house, his reputation was already firmly established. When other neighbors came by with their cookies and casseroles to welcome us and saw me and my brother, just 9 and 11, they'd pull my parents aside and offer hushed warnings. "Keep them away from that nasty little man across the way," Mrs. Devon said. "He can't stand children." "My son Bill swears Bud tried to run him down in his car," Mr. Crane said. "He'll look for any excuse to yell at them. He says the most terrible things," Mrs. Paul said. My parents thanked them, but I don't think they quite believed them. My mom especially wasn't fond of gossip, and she tried to take such rumors with a grain of salt until she could make her own decisions. She didn't have to wait long. My older brother Scotty and I were outside tossing a baseball back and forth one Saturday morning when Scotty tossed it too hard and high. It sailed over my head, bounced in the street, and rolled to a stop at the very edge of Mr. Fillmore's yard. Both of us had overheard our neighbor's warnings and were hesitant to even look at the house, much less approach it. "Go get it, Liz," Scotty said, nudging my shoulder. "But you threw it," I replied. "So? You missed it?" "I couldn't reach it." My whining had no effect. My whining had no effect. He pushed me towards the road, and after checking both ways, I began to creep across towards our ball. I had almost reached it. I just had to take a couple more steps and it would have been within my grasp. But when the front door of the house flew open. "What the hell are you doing?" A stout man with thin, graying hair came bursting outside and stomped across his lawn towards me. My ball," I tried to say, pointing to it. "You brats throwing things at my house. Think it would be funny to break a window?" No, I glanced over my shoulder to see Scotty's half poised to run inside and whimpered. "Get out of here," Mr. Fillmore snapped. "Can I just—" "No!" Before I could react, he scooped up the baseball, which had barely been touching his grass, and stormed back inside. The whole front of his house seemed to shake with the force of his slammed door. It was the first of what could be many run-ins with everyone's least favorite neighbor. Our parents tried to talk him about his behavior, but he just told them to keep their noisy little shits off his lawn and away from his house if we didn't want trouble. Dad thought about calling the cops on him, but as Mom became fond of saying, there was no law against being rude, so we were just told to try and be more careful. "He must not always have been such a bull," Mom said over dinner about a month after we'd moved in. "He's married, you know." Dad scoffed at the idea. "Oh yeah? How do you know?" "Dolores Devon was by again for a chat and it came up. Bud wears a ring and she said she sees Mrs. Fillmore looking out the windows from time to time, but the poor woman never comes outside. She thinks she'd heard Bud say it was a cancer once." "Poor lady. Sick and married to that," Dad said. "Terrible, isn't it? But it does explain a bit about him. He's just trying to keep things quiet and peaceful around his house." "Yeah, sure," Scotty muttered, and Mom frowned at him. "He's probably very sad and lashes out without meaning to." "He's an asshole," Scotty said. "Language," Dad warned. "But yeah, he is." Whatever his reasoning, we all agreed it would be best to just try and avoid Bud Fillmore. Scotty and I were extra careful to keep all our toys well within the confines of our own yard. When we played outside, I also couldn't help but keep a wary eye on the house across the street, just in case he decided to be extra crazy and we had to run for it. That's when I started to notice Mrs. Fillmore. Almost every time Scotty and I were out and I happened to glance at their house, I would see a tall, slender figure outlined behind the sheer curtains in one of the upstairs windows. While I couldn't get a very good look at her, I figured it couldn't be anyone but the missus. Mr. Fillmore didn't have anyone else. She never banged on the window or shouted at us like her husband. She'd just stand there, watching us. I like to imagine that she was a nice lady, a quiet neighbor who just enjoyed seeing kids at play. I remembered my mom saying Mrs. Fillmore was sick and I felt sorry that she was trapped in her house with her horrible husband. So I tried to be nice and smile and wave once. Just once. Mr. Fillmore appeared on his front stoop and yelled at me for being a pest until I retreated inside. When I peeked out the living room... When I peeked out the living room window later, Mrs. Fillmore wasn't in her usual spot anymore. Eventually, we got used to Mr. Fillmore glowering at us as he drove slowly past. His short temper and his loud voice. It was such a regular thing that our fear turned to caution, turned eye-rolling dismissiveness. "Bud doesn't own the street. You kids go out and be kids, and if he has a problem with it, I'll deal with him," Dad said. After that, we started to be a little less careful with our things and a little more free with our laughter. We lost a few balls to the Fillmore yard, 1 or 2 frisbees, but nothing we really cared too much about. Nothing until Scotty's remote-controlled helicopter. It had been a birthday present, and we were both eager to try it out. As soon as we finished supper, we raced out to the front lawn, where Scotty prepared for the helicopter's first flight. Under my brother's inexperienced and clumsy guidance, the helicopter lifted slowly from the ground and staggered drunkenly through the air. In his excitement to keep it aloft, Scotty didn't even realize it was heading right for the Fillmore's yard until it was too late. "Scotty!" I tugged at his arm to try and turn it off course, but it only made things worse. The little helicopter took a nosedive straight into the hedges under Mr. Fillmore's bay window. Scotty frantically wiggled the controls, but the helicopter's blade was stuck fast in the thick greenery. As if he'd been waiting for us to slip up, the front door was flung open and he practically pounced on the toy. "What have I told you?" he bellowed. Before we could argue, he had disappeared back into his house, upstairs. The curtain fluttered just so I knew Mrs. Fillmore was watching. I wanted to call up to her and ask her to get the helicopter back, but Scotty grabbed my wrist and dragged me behind him to find Mom and Dad. When our parents went over later, he refused to come to the door. "Don't worry, kids," they assured us. "Next time we see him, we'll sit down and have a real discussion about this." That wasn't enough for Scotty, though. I followed him up to his room and sat on the end of the bed. While he paced back and forth while ranting about how unfair it all was, he was fuming and furious, and he wanted his birthday present back now. "But how?" I asked. He paused, his gaze sliding to his window and the house beyond. "We're going to take it." It was a childish, simple, stupid plan with no thought of consequence or punishment. We were going to break into the Fillmore's house and get all of our things back. "We'll do it when he goes out next. I can figure out how to get the lock open. It can't be that hard. Then we just have to find her stuff." "What about Mrs. Fillmore? She never leaves. You can distract her or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out." "I don't know, Scotty," I said uneasily. I didn't want to disrupt a poor, sick lady for a few toys. "Don't worry. We'll just be in and out. She probably won't even notice us were there." I doubted that, but I had a hard time saying no to my big brother. Scotty put his plan into action the very next afternoon. We were playing a game of horse in the driveway when Mr. Fillmore's garage opened and his car chugged to life. He was wearing his customary scowl as he drove by. The moment he turned the corner, Scotty chucked our basketball off to the side and bolted across the street. I checked to see if Mrs. Fillmore was in her window, and when I saw no sign of her, I followed. Scotty's idea of getting the lock open turned out to be using a small rock to break the window pane on the door above the latch. It was something he'd seen in a movie or something. Immediately, I had images of flashing red and blue lights and handcuffs, and my stomach turned sharply, but my brother whispered that it would be fine. "He can't prove it was us. Everyone on the street hates him." He sounded so confident that all I could do was nod. Scotty reached carefully through the broken glass, careful not to cut himself, and found the deadbolt. It clicked out of place, and he pushed the door open, letting us into Mr. Fillmore's house. I clung to the back of Scotty's shirt as we tiptoed across the kitchen. It was spotless, obsessively so, and smelled of cleaning supplies. Every window had something tacked over it, old blankets and towels blocking out the bright afternoon sun and casting the room into a gloomy darkness that made the room seem small and oppressive. I swallowed hard and forced myself to follow Scotty, but every room was the same, fastidiously clean, organized, and shrouded in shadows. The bay window that I knew he spied on us from had a little hole cut into the heavy velveteen material, just big enough for someone to see out of. I can just picture him sitting on his plastic-covered couch, watching us, waiting for us to get too close. It was enough to make me shudder. We cleared the hole downstairs pretty quickly, but there was no sign of our things. Shit, Scotty hissed. He must keep it upstairs. But Mrs. Fillmore, just stay close and stay quiet, okay? I nodded, too nervous to say anything else anyway. We'd only gotten up a few steps when the floorboards on the second floor creaked. Scotty immediately pressed himself against the wall and motioned for me to do the same. We listened to the soft padding of footsteps crossing from one room to the other. Scotty, I whispered, grabbing at his sleeve with both hands. Let's just go. No! He went too far this time. I'm going to get my helicopter. Door hinges squeaked from somewhere upstairs and the footsteps stopped. Scotty pulled his arm from me and scampered up the remaining steps. Reluctantly, I went up too. We found a guest bedroom first. It was all muted colors and magazine quality furniture, void of any warmth of personality. Like it was just set up for show, never intended for use. At least it was a bit brighter up there. The windows only had a few layers of sheer curtains over them, enough to obscure visibility but still let in light. The second room was obviously Mr. Fillmore's. It was the most lived-in looking room of them all. And even then, that was only because there were some pictures hanging on the walls and some personal items on the nightstand. The bed was meticulously made, all the clothing, most of which was masculine, hung neatly in the closet. There wasn't even any stray hairs in the brush on the vanity. I wondered how someone could live in such a cold, lifeless house. There was only one room left upstairs, the one Mrs. Fillmore must have gone into. Its door stood half open. Scotty and I traded looks. His determined, mind silently pleading with him to go. He took a step towards the door. I shook my head and grabbed the back of his shirt again. He brushed me off and placed the flat of his hand on the door, pushing it open slowly. Inside the room was almost empty except for a large vanity against one wall. A framed wedding picture was on it, and I recognized Mr. Fillmore despite being younger and thinner. In front of the vanity, posed on a tall stool, was a mannequin. She was wearing what I thought of as a 50s housewife dress, white with little pink and green flowers all over it, a string of pearls, and a blonde wig carefully combed back into a bun. Her featureless face was fixed on the mirror in front of her. Scotty's brow wrinkled, showing the same confusion as I'd felt. We'd both heard Mrs. Fillmore walk to this room, but there was no one there. Let's just go, I begged, a cold sweat starting to trickle down the back of my neck. Scotty shifted his weight, obviously torn, and the floorboard beneath his feet groaned. The mannequin's head turned sharply towards us. Scotty leapt back with a yelp, an arm thrown out protectively in front of me. Liz! His voice was trembling. Run! I stumbled back down the hall on legs that didn't want to work. I could hear Scotty stomping along behind me, and behind him a rapid skittering. We skid up the top of the stairs, and I grabbed the railing to keep from falling headlong down the steps. While I righted myself, I dared to glance back down the hallway. It was empty. Where'd it go? Something thudded against the ceiling. We both looked up and screamed. The mannequin was crawling, spider-like, over our heads. She wrenched her head completely around, turning her blank face towards us, and flitted towards the wall. She started to descend, the whole time facing us. I was still screaming when Scotty hooked his arm around my waist and hauled me down the steps. We crashed at the landing, tripping over one another, and we could hear the click of fiberglass on wood as she pursued us. I was crying, scrambling on my hands and knees across the floor, and my brother was shouting at me to get up, to go. He grabbed the back of my shirt and practically threw me down the hall. And then Scotty was shrieking. I spun. The mannequin was crouched on the last step, one arm outstretched. She had her fingers wrapped around Scotty's ankle. They were tightening, until his bones started to crunch beneath her grip. He kicked at her with his other leg, but it did nothing. She started to drag him back towards the stairs. Scotty! I screamed. But before I could move, he looked up at me and shook his head furiously. Liz. He could barely get the word out through the fear and pain that masked his face. Right. I wanted to stay. I wanted to grab his hand and pull with all my might and drag him out of the house with me. But he shouted again, run, run, over and over until the words became a garbled mess of howling. Terrified cries that chased me out the same door we'd come in through. It was the last time I ever saw my brother. No trace of Scotty was ever found. My parents searched, police searched, there were dogs and special agents, and tons of time, money, and energy were put into trying to find him. But none of it mattered. It was as if he had simply vanished. But Fillmore wasn't a suspect for very long. With no evidence and no history of any kind of criminal record, he was let go. Scotty was dubbed a missing child, reduced to a single box of paperwork that was all too soon moved to the cold case stacks. No one believed me when I told them what really happened. They all said Scotty must have been kidnapped on her way back from Mr. Fillmore's house, and I was too young to really understand it. That I had gotten confused and, in my fear, made up some story using that scary thing I'd just encountered. Mr. Fillmore's mannequin belonged to his late wife, Sharon. He kept it after she passed because it reminded him of her. Sometimes he'd move it around, put it in a window, but it wasn't alive. You can understand that, right, Liz? My therapist was fond of asking. I told her what she wanted to hear, even if I knew it was a lie. The adults preferred it that way. It was easier for all of us. Maybe that's why I never showed anyone that note that had been left taped to our door, typed and anonymous, that just said, I tried to keep you away. I didn't think it would have changed anything. I knew, though, and I never doubted myself or the fact that Scotty had sacrificed himself for me. And up until Mr. Fillmore packed up and moved a few years later, I would sit in my brother's room and I would stare out the window at his house. I would watch the second-story window, waiting for the telltale dark figure to appear behind the curtains, waiting for the quiet neighbor that everyone said didn't exist. Wow. Okay. So basically, that mannequin killed that boy. Wow. Okay. Well, that was good. That was longer than I expected. And you can tell how illiterate I am just by reading that. I'm going to take a quick break and let me try and find a shorter story. Okay. I'll see you when I come back. Welcome back to Pop Culture Ketchup, a Millennials podcast. Okay, so we're going back to the stories, the scary stories. That was a little bit unsettling for me. This one is shorter. This is another Reddit story. It's called A Package Marked, Return to Sender. It is by the user Manon_Lyset. This was posted like 3 years ago. So I'm going to read this one. Again, I have never read it before. So disclaimer if you don't like scary things, or just trigger warning for everything, just in case. Yeah, so we're going to get started. Wow, okay. This put me in a creepy mood. Okay, here we go. A package marked return to sender. This should be the last story, and then I might do a part 2. A package marked return to sender. My neighbor is one of those annoying wannabe YouTube... Okay, calling me out. Sorry, I'm gonna start all over. My neighbor is one of those annoying wannabe YouTube personalities. Over the years, I've seen him cough out cinnamon, lay flat on the hood of his car as it slowly creeps down the driveway, and douse himself in lukewarm water, all the while screaming, "Epic win, epic fail, or fuck, epic maintenance of the status quo for all I know." It can get tiring to watch him go about his shenanigans in the pursuit of viral fame. So, when he knocked on my door the other day, told me he was going away for a few weeks, and asked that I get his mail, honestly, it was a relief. I can't explain the peace of mind I had knowing I didn't have to brace myself for any of his stupidity for a while. I was always afraid his stunts would wind up bleeding over into my life. Things were pretty normal for the first couple days. He received a few bills, a bit of spam, and what I would only assume was a birthday card. Then, one evening, I got home to find a cardboard box waiting on his front porch. In big red letters was written, "Return to sender." I'm no small fry, but I admit I had trouble lifting the box on my own. It was really freaking heavy. Lugging it across the road to my house was even harder, and I quickly realized there was no way I was going to drag it up the stairs and through my front door. I decided I'd leave his package in my garage. It wasn't like I kept my car in there. The garage door was a piece of shit that refused to open without a good thug and a whack. It was less trouble just leaving the car in the driveway than it was to fight with the garage door every morning and night. In hindsight, I should have set the package down while I struggled to open the tricky door, but you know how it is when you've got a good grip on something, no point in setting it down if you don't have to. It was as I kicked the door for a third time that I lost my grip on the package and it fell to the ground. I heard a light crack inside. Shit, I cursed. I hope I hadn't broken anything important, but I figured I just wouldn't tell my neighbor about it and let him assume the break happened en route. Hands free, I finally managed to get the garage door unstuck, and boy did it screech in protest as it rolled up and over me. I dragged the box the rest of the way, setting it in the corner for whenever my neighbor would come back to claim it. And then I forgot all about it, until a few days passed, that is. I'm not sure how long it took for the smell to waft in from the crack under the garage to house door, but it came in slow progression. It was a sickly, sweet odor similar to a skunk, and for the first few days after I smelled it, I genuinely assumed that's exactly what it was. Roadkill that had left its mark on my house. It was only when I realized the scent was growing more intense instead of fading that I went looking for a source. That's when I opened the garage door, and that's when the odor knocked me back holding my nose. The culprit wasn't hard to identify. The only change in my garage was the box in the corner. I remember thinking it must have been one of those meat of the month subscription boxes. The meat must have gone rancid from being left out of the fridge for so long. How much meat could have been in there for the box to have been so large and heavy? An entire freaking cow? I covered my nose as I approached the box, a pair of scissors in my hands. I probably wouldn't have needed them to open it, as it had become soggy enough at the bottom to poke through with a finger. But I wasn't about to poke my finger into spoiled meat juices. That soggy bottom was the reason I had to open the box in the first place. If I tried to drag it out whole, everything would spill onto the floor. I was going to have to dump the pieces of meat one garbage bag at a time and take them down to the dumpster, a process I wasn't looking forward to. My scissors tore through the tape along the top of the cardboard box. I thought the smell couldn't get any worse, but as I flipped the flaps open, I discovered a whole new gamut of stink. It was like opening a burning oven, but instead of a heat wave, I was met with waves of piss, sweat, shit, and putrefaction. Lord help me, Jesus. It was so bad that I staggered back and had to force down the puke begging to guzzle out of me. I don't think I could have handled that scent mingling with the horrors coming out of the box. I'm not ashamed to admit I ran out of the door for a breath of fresh air, but in the short time I'd spent in the garage, The smell had become so ingrained in the fabric of my clothes that it clung to me like a shadow. Nothing had tried to keep the smell out of my nostrils. Not air fresheners, not a mask, not 3 showers and a change of clothes. Every second that box lay open in my garage was another second the smell was allowed a foothold into my home. I had to bite the bullet. I returned to the garage, the flaps of the box still open as though inviting me to look. I was prepared, a clothespin pinning my nostrils shut, a garbage bag in one hand, the strongest cleaner I could find in the other, and long rubber gloves to keep my skin from having to touch what was inside. But as it turns out, I needed none of those things. I wouldn't have to touch or clean the contents of that box. I would only have to suffer the nightmares every night. You see, there was meat in that box, but it didn't come from a cow or a pig. No, it was worse than that. It was my neighbor, dead. Still in one piece, but dead. I called the cops, and naturally, they took me in for interrogation. It's kind of hard not to suspect the man with the corpse in his garage. After all, thankfully, they soon realized I wasn't involved. My DNA might have been all over the box. The smell might have left a mark throughout my house. But there was one piece of irrefutable evidence in my neighbor's own hands that proved my innocence. A vlogging camera. They showed me the footage only once. I'm not sure if they were allowed to, or if they felt so bad for me they figured it couldn't hurt. Either way, I saw it. My neighbor was sitting in the box outside of a shipping facility, laughing as he told the world how he was going to mail himself across state lines. He'd brought pee bottles, food, a pillow, and a few flashlights. His friend, a guy I'd seen at his place several times to help him with his stunts, closed the lid and presumably dropped him off for shipment. Through the next couple of hours or days, I'm honestly not sure my neighbor recorded a few short clips about his progress. I think I'm in a truck now. I can feel it moving. But must be in a warehouse, pretty warm here. Still got plenty of food. That kind of stuff. And then on the last entry, the box toppled over, he broke his neck, and that was it. The camera recorded until either the memory card got too full or the battery died. There's one thing I didn't tell the police after they showed me the video. One thing I'd heard in the footage that will haunt me to the day I die. Just after the tumble that broke his neck, I heard the familiar screech sound of my garage door. Oh my god. 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 Okay. Okay. So before I started reading the story, I read the last paragraph just to see if it was actually scary or not. And I was like, oh, okay, this won't be that bad. But I didn't read the story, so I had no idea what it was about. I just read the ending. Oh my god. So, basically, he was carrying the box. And remember, he dropped it and heard a crack. So his neighbor was alive that entire time until he dropped it. And the camera was recording the entire time. Oh my, until like he left the box in there. Oh my god. 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 Wow. Okay, that was way better than the first story. Okay. Well, I need to cool off. That was so unsettling. Well, thank you for listening to the first part, because I think I'm going to do a second part because that was good. The first part of the scary stories for Halloween. Just a reminder, this is Pop Culture Ketchup, a Millennials podcast. If you did honestly like what you heard, those two stories, and you want to hear the second part, make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you know when I upload. I do upload on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. So there's that. But subscribing really helps me out a lot. It helps with the algorithm, helps me get seen more, and then also liking the video helps as well. And then also watching the video all the way through, not just 3 or 4 minutes. Again, I hope you liked it. Follow me on my socials at itsdev, ITSDEVVV, or also on my Facebook page, Pop Culture Ketchup. It's ketchup, actually like the condiment, not actually catching up. So I hope you enjoyed that. I will catch you on the next one. And pick your costumes. Comment down below also which story was your favorite one. The one about the return to sender, or the one about Mr. Fillmore and his the quiet new neighbor. So let me know in the comments below, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.